Fans around the NBA held their breath with fear after seeing Kevin Durant go down with what at the time looked like it could be an Achilles tendon injury. Understandably, the effects of this could be devastating for the Warriors' postseason chances and Durant's health going forward if this was in fact what had happened. Welcome back, everybody. For those new, my name's Brian and I'm a doctor and a sports fan, and it's my goal on this channel to combine those interests to help explain different sports injuries and sports medicine topics in a way that you all can learn from and better understand. At the game last night, it was felt that this was just a calf strain as opposed to an Achilles tear, and this thought was confirmed with the MRI testing that revealed a mild injury to the calf muscle for Kevin Durant. This video is going to be your complete guide to understanding the basics about calf strains and specifically what happened in the case of Durant. We'll go over the key anatomy of the calf muscle and where these injuries typically occur. We'll talk about the mechanism and review the footage from Durant's injury to try and identify when it happened and why it happened. And finally, we'll talk about the treatment for these types of injuries and what it could mean with the rest of Durant's health and the Warriors postseason going forward. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you like this type of content and want to stay up to date with future injuries and videos, and let's get started. We all know the calf muscles as those key ones in the lower leg that help push us off the ground and kind of raise us up onto our toes. The proper term for them is the GASTROCNEMIUS muscles, and there's actually two heads. There's a medial and a lateral head on the inside and the outside of the leg. The tendon from these muscles comes down to form part of the Achilles tendon and then inserts on the heel. But in the same compartment of the lower leg, there's actually two other muscles in that superficial compartment that are part of that whole complex. On top, we have the gastrocnemius muscles, and then below that, we have the plantaris and the soleus muscle. There's muscles even deeper to those that we won't talk about in this video, but it's important to remember those three muscles as part of that superficial compartment in the back of the leg that come down to form the Achilles tendon that ultimately inserts onto the back of the heel. The other key part of the anatomy to understand about the gastrocnemius as to why it's susceptible to injury is it actually crosses two joints. It's what we call a biarticulate muscle. The gastrocnemius actually goes up and inserts on the femur up above on the other side of the knee joint and then goes down onto the heel. So it spans across the knee joint and across the ankle joint, which makes it more susceptible to injury than if it just spanned a single joint. Most commonly, the specific part of the gastrocnemius that's injured is that medial head or the inside head, and it usually happens around the spot where the muscle and the tendon start to come together, or the myotendinous junction. Oftentimes, gastrocnemius or calf strains occur whenever you're trying to do any sort of forceful jumping or pushing off, where you're loading those muscles. It's the same sort of mechanism that can cause a calf strain as an Achilles rupture. It just depends on where the susceptible point in that whole musculotendinous complex is at. That area is going to tear or get injured at the weakest spot, and so if you've got any weakness or damage to that Achilles tendon, it's going to be more susceptible to damage, versus if you have any weakness or irritation in that muscle, that can be the area that could get damaged instead, like what happened with Durant. Looking next specifically at Durant's injury in relation to how calf muscle strains can happen. Now, I don't actually think that the part where he got injured was when he landed on the foot, like we usually see with an Achilles. If you notice, he actually lands, kind of takes a couple of steps backwards, turns to run up the court, and after he pushes off the court, was when he suddenly held up and kind of felt that pop, he said, and reached back on his leg. We don't know 100% of course, but my guess is from his initial reaction that it happened more so when he was running up the court as opposed to when he landed. After the game, we heard reports from the Warriors that basically they weren't concerned about the Achilles. They had ruled out an Achilles injury. And people wonder how this was possible and why they would say this so confidently at the arena. Well, there's actually pretty good, effective ways to evaluate for an Achilles tendon rupture just back in the training locker room. There's a specific exam test called the THOMPSON test where you have the patient lay on their stomach on a table with their feet hanging off the edge. You then have someone essentially just squeeze the calf muscles. A normal response is that when you squeeze the calf muscles, the foot points down. But in the case of an Achilles rupture, when you squeeze the muscle, the foot doesn't move because that connection has been disrupted. And this test is actually pretty effective from research. It's around 96% sensitive, or in other words, 96% effective at trying to rule it out if it's negative. At the same time, it has about a 98% positive predictive value, meaning if the test is positive, how reliably can you predict that there is a rupture? So right away, they're definitely going to be doing this in the locker room. And if they do this test and there's good movement of the foot, it says, hey, that's reassuring that the Achilles might not be ruptured. The second thing they're probably going to do back at the arena is look with an ultrasound machine. The Achilles tendon is one of the easier things to assess with an ultrasound machine, and they can very easily scan up and down the length of the tendon to make sure that everything is still intact. Certainly you can have some smaller tears that you might not pick up on these exams, but if you're trying to make that decision of complete rupture versus intact, Those are two really good tools that the doctors and trainers have at their disposal, which is I'm sure why they came out after the game and said, we're not worried about an Achilles rupture, we think it's a calf strain. What does this mean for the rest of the playoffs and Durant's career going forward? There's some different systems of grading calf strains, but one of the ways you'll see is actually mild, moderate, and severe. A mild can be considered also a grade 1, where there's very minimal pain and the athlete's usually able to continue playing and has minimal disruption in the actual muscle fibers. A grade 2 is moderate, and in this case, there's clear loss of strength and clear range of motion deficits in that muscle. In this case, somewhere between 10 and 50% of the muscle fibers are disrupted. And then a grade 3 is a severe injury, oftentimes requiring surgery to repair just because of how much significant disruption is there. Treatment duration and what they do depends on the severity. We've heard that with Durant, it's mild. It's a grade 1. It's not as severe as it could be. We already know he's out for game 6, and I wouldn't expect him at all to be back for game 7 because we know that even a grade 1 or a mild strain often takes at least a week or two to get better. More moderate and severe injuries can take on the order of weeks to months, and so it's really good that it's just a mild one that hopefully won't be lingering beyond just a couple or a few weeks. If everything goes well with his rehab, I think it certainly is feasible to believe that he could be back for the NBA Finals and even back for part of the Western Conference Finals if they make it there, depending on how many games it goes. What they're going to be doing to treat and manage this is initially just letting him rest. With that injury, there is a tear in the muscle fibers, and so you need to let that tear scar down and heal back up to get its strength back. Otherwise, if you go out and keep playing, you're going to further the tear, or you could put other structures at risk like the Achilles. Some studies have found that around 10 days is actually required of healing time for that scar tissue to form in the muscle and have similar strength to the surrounding muscles. So in that first treatment period, you're resting it. You want to limit the stretching because you don't want to disrupt that healing scar tissue, and you're trying to minimize the swelling and the inflammation that's present. Once this all goes down, you're able to begin some basic range of motion activities, and then you progress on to more strength development, and then finally getting back to basketball activities. These things can really linger. This can be something that might feel pretty good, but then when Durant goes out and tries to play or push off or jump, he aggravates it, and then that whole cycle kind of starts over. Thankfully, though, this isn't his Achilles. I mean, if it was his Achilles, we know he would have been done for the rest of the year and would have had huge impact on the rest of his career. And we'll see. Obviously, if the Warriors are able to get to the Western Conference Finals, depending on how many games that goes, there's a chance that if he recovers well and quickly, that he might be back for part of the Western Conference Finals. But don't be surprised at all if he has a more delayed healing course and this actually extends to more on the order of a few weeks and potentially keeps him out for the rest of the playoffs. The update next week will definitely give us more information as to how he's progressing, and we'll have a better sense of what's going on. So that's it. I hope you all enjoyed the video, learning something here about calf strains, particularly as it relates to what happened with Kevin Durant. Let me know questions, comments, thoughts you guys have below, ideas for future videos. Thanks as always for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.